From the heart of Africa to your screen, this is Raw Tales Africa, where every story cuts deep. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because it will mean the whole world to me. Now, let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The hospital corridors echoed with desperate footsteps as Dr. Kenneth Adebayo rushed through the pediatric ward. His usually perfect white coat wrinkled, his hands trembling. Behind him, his wife, Fumi, clutched a small bundle. Their 6-year-old daughter, Kemi, burning with fever, her tiny body convulsing in ways that made grown nurses look away. "Doctor, please," Fumi whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The test showed nothing. 3 weeks of every medicine, every specialist. She's getting worse." Kenneth's jaw clenched. The same man who had stood in this very hospital 6 months ago, mocking a traditional healer in front of colleagues, now faced his greatest nightmare. His medical degree from London, his years of training, his modern equipment, none of it could save his dying child. "There has to be something," he muttered, but his voice cracked. Deep down, he knew. He had tried everything Western medicine offered. Fumi grabbed his arm. "Kenneth, what about the traditional healer? The one you humiliated. What if we..." "Never." Kenneth's voice thundered through the hallway. "I will not subject my daughter to some village witchcraft." But as little Kemi's breathing became more labored, as her fever spiked to dangerous levels that machines couldn't control, Kenneth felt his certainty crumble. The very foundations of everything he believed in were shaking. And somewhere in a quiet room, 60 kilometers away, an old man called Babaduni sat under an ancient baobab tree, grinding herbs with hands that had healed hundreds. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "The proud doctor will come. His heart will be broken first, then opened." But this story started 6 months earlier, when pride met wisdom and a man's arrogance set him on a collision course with destiny. 6 months earlier, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Federal Medical Center, Abeokuta, as Dr. Kenneth Adebayo adjusted his pristine white coat and checked his reflection in the chrome elevator doors. At 38, he was the youngest chief medical officer the hospital had ever appointed. His credentials were impeccable. First-class honors from University of Lagos, residency at Giz Hospital, London, fellowship in internal medicine from Johns Hopkins. Kenneth carried himself like a man who had conquered the world through sheer intellect and determination. His patients respected him, his colleagues envied him, and his wife, Fumi, adored him. Life was exactly as he had planned it. "Good morning, Dr. Adebayo," called Nurse Aduni as he strode through the medical wing. "The patient in Ward 7 is asking about the traditional medicine consultation you promised to consider." Kenneth stopped mid-stride, his expression hardening. "Traditional medicine? In my hospital?" He turned to face the young nurse, his voice rising. "Sister Aduni, I thought I made it clear. We practice evidence-based medicine here, not village superstitions." Nurse Aduni, a gentlewoman in her 50s, who had seen many doctors come and go, lowered her voice. "Doctor, with respect, the patient has been here 3 weeks. Her treatments aren't working. Her family believes..." Our family believes in fairy tales, Kenneth interrupted, loud enough for other staff to hear. I didn't spend 12 years studying medicine to watch witch doctors wave chicken feathers over my patients. The corridor felt silent. Several nurses exchanged glances. Dr. Folake, Kenneth's colleague, approached cautiously. Kenneth, maybe we should at least what, Folake? Kenneth's eyes blazed. Abandon everything we learned in medical school? Throw away decades of scientific advancement? These traditional healers are nothing but fraudsters preying on desperate people. Unknown to Kenneth, in the hospital lobby, an elderly man in simple agbada had been waiting patiently for 2 hours. Baba Duni, renowned traditional healer from Abeokuta community, had been invited by the patient's family after their daughter showed no improvement under conventional treatment. Baba Duni was not what people expected of a traditional healer. At 72, he carried himself with quiet dignity. His weathered hands told stories of decades spent gathering herbs in the forest. His eyes held wisdom that came from understanding both the seen and unseen world. He had studied with his grandfather from age 7, learning not just remedies but the delicate balance between body, mind, and spirit. The patient's family, the Oyebamijis, had brought their 19-year-old daughter, Tola, to the hospital after she collapsed at university. For weeks, she had been losing weight, experiencing severe fatigue, and developing strange rashes that appeared and disappeared without pattern. Every test came back normal. Every medication failed. Baba, Mrs. Oyebamiji whispered as she approached the healer in the lobby. The chief doctor doesn't want to see you. He says you people are fake. Baba Duni's expression didn't change. He had faced such skepticism many times before, especially from Western educated doctors who saw traditional medicine as their enemy rather than their ally. My daughter, he said gently, healing is not about pride. It is about service. If the doctor believes his way is the only way, then perhaps the spirit will teach him differently. Mrs. Oyebamiji's eyes filled with tears. But my Tola is getting worse. The doctors don't know what's wrong with her. Baba Duni stood slowly, his walking stick tapping softly on the marble floor. Bring me to see the child. Let me speak with this doctor who knows so much about healing. As they walked toward the medical wing, Kenneth was concluding his morning rounds with characteristic efficiency. He stopped at Tola's bed, studying her charts with the same focused intensity he brought to every case. Miss Oyebamiji, he addressed the weak young woman lying in the hospital bed. Your latest blood work shows some improvements in your white cell count, but we are still not seeing the progress we would like. I'm going to increase your steroid dosage and add another antibiotic. Tola's mother cleared her throat. Doctor, we brought our traditional healer. Could you please? Kenneth's head snapped up. I beg your pardon. The healer is here, doctor. If you could just allow him to examine. Absolutely not. Kenneth's voice carried across the ward. This is a medical facility, not a shrine. I will not have some illiterate village man interfering with my patient's treatment. That was when Baba Duni entered the ward. The old man's presence seemed to change the atmosphere immediately. Even the gossiping visitors fell silent. Kenneth turned to see a figure that challenged every stereotype he held about traditional healers. This was not the wild-eyed, bone-rattling character of his imagination. This was a man of evident wisdom and dignity. "Good morning, doctor," Babaduni said in clear, educated English. "I am Aduni Ogundimu. I was invited by this family to assist with their daughter's healing." Kenneth's initial surprise quickly turned to irritation. The man's composure only made him angrier. "Mr. Whatever your name is," Kenneth began dismissively. "This is a hospital, not a market square. We don't practice magic here." Babaduni studied Kenneth with eyes that seemed to see through him. "Young doctor, I have been healing people since before you were born. I do not practice magic. I practice medicine. The medicine of our ancestors, tested by thousands of years of success." Kenneth laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made several nurses cringe. "Medicine? You call grinding leaves and chanting incantations medicine? Do you have a medical degree? Have you ever seen the inside of a laboratory? Have you published any peer-reviewed research?" "I have something more valuable than your papers, doctor," Babaduni replied calmly. "I have results. Thousands of patients healed when hospitals couldn't help them." "Results?" Kenneth's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Show me your clinical trials. Show me your double-blind studies. Show me your evidence." The confrontation was drawing a crowd. Nurses, orderlies, and other medical staff began gathering around, sensing drama. Some looked uncomfortable with Kenneth's aggressive tone, but none dared intervene. Dr. Folake tried once more to mediate. "Kenneth, perhaps we could—" "No, Folake." Kenneth turned his fury on his colleague. "This is exactly what is wrong with our society. We send our best minds abroad to study real medicine. Then we come home and bow down to superstition. This man probably doesn't even know what a virus is." Babaduni remained remarkably calm despite the public humiliation. "Doctor, I understand that your education has taught you that what you cannot measure does not exist. But tell me, can you measure love? Can you put hope in a test tube? Can you prescribe joy?" Kenneth's face reddened. "Don't give me philosophy. Medicine is about science, not feelings." "And yet," Babaduni said quietly, "your science has failed this young woman. She has been here 3 weeks and she grows weaker. Perhaps there are things your machines cannot see." Kenneth stepped closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "Are you suggesting my treatment is inadequate?" "I am suggesting, young doctor, that healing is bigger than your understanding." Babaduni's voice remained gentle but firm. "Your ancestors knew this. Your great-grandmother probably knew remedies that could help this child. But you have forgotten who you are in your rush to become someone else." The words hit Kenneth like a physical blow. His great-grandmother had indeed been known for her healing herbs, something he had spent his adult life trying to forget. "How dare you!" Kenneth's control finally snapped. "Security! Remove this fraud from my hospital immediately." 2 security guards appeared. Looking uncomfortable with the situation, Baba Duni raised his hand peacefully. I will leave, doctor, but understand this. Healing is not about ego. When your pride is broken, when your science fails you, when you have nowhere else to turn, then you will remember this conversation. As the security guards escorted Baba Duni toward the exit, the old healer turned back one final time. The spirits have a way of teaching humility to those who need it most. I pray your lesson will not be too painful. Kenneth watched the old man leave, his hands trembling with rage. Around him, the crowd slowly dispersed, but he could feel their eyes on him, their silent judgment. Get back to work. He barked at the nursing staff. And I don't want to hear another word about traditional medicine in this hospital. But as Kenneth returned to his office, slamming the door behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. The old man's words echoed in his mind. When your pride is broken, when your science fails you. He pushed the thoughts away, burying himself in medical journals and research papers. He was Dr. Kenneth Adebayo, Chief Medical Officer, trained in the finest hospitals in the world. He didn't need validation from some village herbalist. That evening, at his beautiful home in the government-reserved area, Kenneth recounted the date's event to his wife, Fumi, over dinner. Their 6-year-old daughter, Kemi, played nearby, her laughter filling their elegant dining room. You should have seen him, Fumi, Kenneth said, still agitated, standing there in his grandfather's clothes, talking about ancestors and spirits in the 21st century. Fumi, a soft-spoken woman who worked as a bank manager, listened with growing concern. Kenneth, maybe he was just trying to help. Some of these traditional healers do know things. Not you too. Kenneth slammed his fork down. My own wife, believing in primitive nonsense. Little Kemi looked up from her coloring book. Daddy, why are you shouting? Kenneth's expression immediately softened. He knelt beside his daughter, smoothing her hair. I'm sorry, princess. Daddy is just tired. Kemi smiled and returned to her drawing. A colorful picture of a hospital with sick figures representing doctors and patients. Look, Daddy, this is you saving people. Kenneth's heart swelled with love and pride. This was his world, his successful career, his beautiful family, his comfortable life. What did he need with ancient superstitions? But as he tucked Kemi into bed that night, reading a favorite story about a brave little girl who helps medical forest creatures, Kenneth felt a strange unease. The old healer's words kept returning. When your science fails you, when you have nowhere else to turn. He shook his head, dismissing the thoughts. His science would never fail him. His training, his expertise, his modern medical knowledge, these were solid foundations, not like the shifting sands of traditional belief. Yet, that night, Kenneth's dreams were filled with images of his great-grandmother, grinding herbs in her backyard, singing ancient songs as she prepared remedies that seemed to heal everything from heartbreak to high fever. In his dreams, she looked at him with sad eyes and whispered, My child, knowledge without wisdom is like a river without banks. It floods and destroys everything in its path. Kenneth woke with a start, his heart racing. It was just a dream, he told himself, just his subconscious processing the day's strange encounter. But somewhere in the depth of his soul, a small voice whispered that the old Eli's prophecy was already beginning to unfold. In the days following the confrontation, Kenneth's reputation grew even stronger. Word spread quickly through Abeokuta's medical community about the chief medical officer who had put a traditional healer in his place. Colleagues praised his stand for scientific medicine. Medical students quoted his passionate defense of evidence-based practice. Kenneth basked in the approval, giving interviews to local radio stations about the dangers of traditional medicine. These so-called healers prey on desperate families, he declared on Radio Lagos during a popular morning show. They delay proper treatment, sometimes with fatal results. We must protect our people from these charlatans. The interviewer, a young journalist named Tunde, pushed back gently. But, doctor, some of our listeners have called in saying traditional medicine helped them when hospitals couldn't. What do you have to say to them? Kenneth's laugh was condescending. What I say, Tunde, is that anecdotal evidence is not scientific evidence. People recover from illness all the time. It is called natural healing. These herbalists just take credit for what the body does naturally. But surely, there must be some value in traditional practices that have existed for thousands of years. Thousands of years of ignorance don't equal one day of scientific knowledge, Kenneth replied sharply. Would you trust a witch doctor to perform heart surgery? Would you let someone who learned medicine from his grandfather treat your cancer? The interview clips went viral on social media, with Kenneth positioned as a champion of modern rational medicine against backward superstition. He received invitations to speak at medical conferences, universities, and professional associations. Meanwhile, Baba Duni continued his quiet practice in his modest compound on the outskirts of Abeokuta. Despite the public humiliation, he harbored no anger toward Kenneth. Instead, he focused on his patients, farmers with chronic pain, mothers with difficult pregnancies, children with mysterious ailments that hospitals couldn't diagnose. The Oyebamiji family had eventually discharged their daughter Tola from the hospital against medical advice, bringing her to Baba Duni instead. Within 2 weeks of treatments with carefully prepared herbal remedies, dietary changes, and spiritual counseling, Tola's condition began improving dramatically. Baba, Mrs. Oyebamiji said during a follow-up visit, should we tell that doctor at the hospital? Should we show him that Tola is better? Baba Duni shook his head gently. My daughter, pride must crack before wisdom can enter. This doctor is not ready to hear the truth. 1 month after the hospital confrontation, Kenneth's confidence reached new heights when he successfully diagnosed and treated a rare case of meningitis that had been misdiagnosed at other hospitals. The local newspaper ran a feature story. Local doctors' expertise saves young father's life. Kenneth framed the article and hung it in his office, directly opposite his medical degree certificate. He was untouchable now, a medical hero whose reputation grew stronger each day. But the spirits, as Baba Duni had warned, were preparing their own lesson. It began subtly on a Tuesday morning in October. Kenneth was reviewing patient files when his secretary knocked on his door. "Doctor, your wife is on line 1. She says it's about Kemi." Kenneth picked up the phone, expecting to hear about some minor childhood mishap. Instead, Fumi's voice was tight with worry. "Kenneth, I'm at Kemi's school. She collapsed during morning assembly. They want me to take her to the hospital." Kenneth's blood went cold. "Collapsed? What do you mean collapsed?" "She just fell down. She was standing for the national anthem, then she crumpled. The school nurse says she has a high fever." "Bring her to my hospital immediately," Kenneth ordered, already grabbing his car keys. "I'll meet you in emergency." When Kenneth saw his daughter being carried into the emergency room, his heart nearly stopped. Little Kemi, usually so vibrant and energetic, lay listless in her mother's arms, her small face flushed with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Get me a full blood panel, chest x-ray and urine analysis," Kenneth barked at the emergency team as they transferred Kemi to a gurney. "And I want a lumbar puncture prepared, just in case." For the next 6 hours, Kenneth threw every diagnostic tool at his disposal at his daughter's mysterious illness. The test revealed elevated white cell count suggesting infection, but nothing specific. Her fever spiked to 104 degrees Fahrenheit despite aggressive treatment with antipyretics. "What are you thinking, Kenneth?" Dr. Folake asked, studying Kemi's charts. "Could be viral, could be bacterial," Kenneth muttered, his usual confidence wavering. "But nothing fits the classic presentation. Her symptoms are unusual." Fumi sat beside their daughter's bed, holding her tiny hand. "Kenneth, she keeps talking about dreams, strange dreams about old women singing to her." Kenneth dismissed this immediately. "It's the fever-causing hallucinations, perfectly normal." But as the night wore on, Kemi's condition worsened. She began having mild seizures. Her temperature became harder to control, and she developed a rash that appeared and disappeared in patterns the medical team couldn't explain. "Doctor," one of the nurses whispered, "the rash, it looks like the pattern we saw on that girl, Tolabamiji, before our family took her away." Kenneth's head snapped up. "What did you say?" The nurse looked nervous. "I just meant the rash pattern is similar, but Tola got better after our family took her to that traditional healer." "Don't you dare suggest," Kenneth began, but stopped himself. His daughter was sick. This was not the time for his usual lectures. Over the next week, Kenneth consulted every specialist he knew: pediatric neurologists, infectious disease experts, hematologists. All ran extensive tests. All came up with the same conclusion: an unusual presentation that didn't fit standard diagnostic categories. Meanwhile, Kemi grew weaker. She stopped eating, barely responded to stimulation, and her fever became resistant to even the strongest medications. Kenneth watched his daughter fade before his eyes, his medical expertise feeling more inadequate each day. "Kenneth," Fumi said one evening as they sat in Kemi's hospital room, "I've been thinking about that traditional healer. The one you..." "Absolutely not." Kenneth cut her off, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "But what if..." "What if what, Fumi? What if I abandon everything I've learned?" everything I believe in and take our daughter to some village herbalist? Fumi's eyes filled with tears. What if we are losing her while you protect your pride? The words hit Kenneth like a physical blow. He looked at his daughter, so small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines that seemed to mock his medical training. That night, alone in his office, Kenneth did something he hadn't done since medical school. He researched traditional African medicine with an open mind. What he found shook him to his core. Studies from reputable institutions show that certain traditional remedies had genuine therapeutic value. Research from Nigeria's own universities documented cases where traditional healers had successfully treated conditions that Western medicine struggled with. Even the World Health Organization had programs exploring traditional medicine integration with modern healthcare. Kenneth stared at his computer screen, his worldview cracking. Had he been wrong? Had his arrogance blinded him to potentially helpful treatments? As if summoned by his doubts, his secretary knocked on his door at midnight. "Doctor, I am sorry to disturb you, but there is someone here to see you." At this hour? Who? "A traditional healer, sir. He says he has information about your daughter's condition." Kenneth's blood ran cold. "Send him away. I don't want—" "Sir," the secretary interrupted gently. "He's the same man from before, Baba Duni. He says he knows what is wrong with your daughter." Kenneth sat in stunned silence. How could the old healer know about Kemi's illness? They hadn't seen each other since the hospital confrontation weeks ago. Against every instinct, Kenneth found himself saying, "Send him in." Baba Duni entered the office with the same quiet dignity he had shown before. But this time, Kenneth noticed something different in the old man's eyes. Not triumph or vindication, but deep compassion. "Doctor," Baba Duni said softly, "I heard about your daughter. I came because no parent should watch their child suffer when help is available." Kenneth's throat felt tight. "How did you know?" "Word travels fast in our community. And besides," Baba Duni sat down without being invited, "the spirits told me a proud father would soon understand what desperation truly means." For a long moment, the two men sat in silence. Finally, Kenneth spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "My daughter is dying, and I don't know why." Baba Duni nodded. "Your daughter has what we call spirit sickness. It is rare, but not unknown. It happens when a child's spirit is disturbed by negative energy, usually caused by family conflicts or broken spiritual harmony." Kenneth wanted to scoff, to dismiss this as nonsense, but he found he couldn't. His daughter was dying, and modern medicine had no answers. "The symptoms," Baba Duni continued: "fever that won't break, seizures without neurological cause, rashes that come and go like messages from unseen realm. Your machines cannot detect this kind of illness because it exists beyond the physical." "That's impossible," Kenneth whispered, but even he could hear the doubt in his own voice. "Is it?" Baba Duni leaned forward. "Tell me, doctor, in all your years of medical practice, Have you never seen an illness that defied explanation? Have you never watched a patient recover mysteriously or decline without medical reason? Kenneth thought of several cases throughout his career. Patients who should have lived but died. Others who should have died but recovered. He had also attributed this to factors he hadn't identified yet, not to anything beyond physical medicine. Your daughter's illness, Baba Duni continued, is connected to the spiritual imbalance you created when you publicly rejected our traditional ways. The ancestors are not hungry, but they are disappointed. They are showing you through your daughter that healing requires both scientific knowledge and spiritual wisdom. Kenneth's hands clenched into fists. You are saying my daughter is sick because I don't believe in traditional medicine? I am saying your daughter is sick because you have forgotten that medicine is about more than just treating symptoms. True healing addresses the whole problem: body, mind, and spirit. Your training taught you to heal the body, but you rejected the wisdom that could heal the spirit. Kenneth stared at the old healer, his mind reeling. Everything in his medical training screamed that this was nonsense, that illness had physical causes and required physical treatment. But his daughter was dying, and all his physical treatments had failed. Even if I believed you, Kenneth said slowly, what could you possibly do that my medical team couldn't? Baba Duni smiled sadly. Doctor, I can heal your daughter, but not just with herbs and remedies. I can heal her because I understand that her illness is not just in her body. It is in the broken relationship between traditional wisdom and modern knowledge, between you and your heritage, between your pride and your love for your child. Kenneth felt tears welling up in his eyes, tears he had held back for days of watching his daughter suffer. What do you want from me? He whispered. I want you to humble yourself, doctor. I want you to acknowledge that your way is not the only way. I want you to ask for help, not as a superior to an inferior, but as one healer to another. The words hung in the air between them. Kenneth's entire identity, his professional reputation, his self-image, all of it hung in the balance. But as he thought of Kemi, so small and sick in a hospital bed, he felt something crack inside his chest. His pride, the thing that had defined him for so long, was finally beginning to break. Kenny sat in his office chair, staring at Baba Duni through tears he couldn't hold back anymore. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that seemed to highlight every line of exhaustion on his face. For the first time in his adult life, Dr. Kenneth Adebayo, Chief Medical Officer, London-trained physician, champion of modern medicine, felt completely powerless. My daughter, he whispered, his voice breaking. She's all I have. If something happens to her. Baba Duni's expression softened with infinite compassion. Doctor, your love for your child is evident, but love without humility cannot heal what pride has broken. Kenneth looked up, his eyes red with unshed tears. What do you need me to do? I need you to admit that your knowledge has limits. I need you to acknowledge that traditional medicine has value. And I need you to ask for my help, not as a desperate father grasping at straws, but as a fellow healer recognizing another healer's expertise. The words stuck in Kenneth's throat. Everything in his training, his education, his professional identity rebelled against what Baba Aduni was asking. But as he thought of Kemi's labored breathing, a burning fever, a small body fighting a battle that modern medicine couldn't even identify, he felt his resistance crumble. Kenneth's voice faltered. He tried again. I was wrong to dismiss you so harshly. Your methods, they might have value I don't understand. Baba Duni shook his head gently. Doctor, those are the words of a man trying to save face, not the words of a father willing to save his child. Kenneth closed his eyes, and in that darkness, he saw his daughter's face, not as she was now, sick and fading, but as she had been just weeks ago, laughing and playing, drawing pictures of hospitals where her daddy saved people. The memory broke something inside him. When he opened his eyes, tears streamed down his cheeks. I need your help, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I don't understand your methods. I don't know how your medicine works, but my daughter is dying and I have no answers. Please, please help her. For the first time since entering the office, Baba Duni smiled. Now you speak as a father, not as a title. Now we can begin to heal your child. The old healer stood up, his walking stick tapping softly on the floor. But understand, doctor, healing your daughter will require more than just giving her herbs. It will require healing the spiritual rupture caused by your rejection of traditional wisdom. It will require you to publicly acknowledge what you have learned. Kenneth nodded without hesitation. Anything. I will do anything. Very well. First, I must see the child. Then, I must gather specific herbs that grow only in the forest during the full moon, which is tonight. The treatment will take 3 days, and during this time, you must stay with us, learning how traditional healing actually works. As they walked toward Kemi's room, Kenneth felt as if he were walking through a dream. Nurses and colleagues stared as the chief medical officer walked alongside the traditional healer he had once publicly humiliated. Whispers followed them down the corridor. Is that the healer Dr. Adebayo threw out last month? What is he doing back here? I heard the doctor's daughter is very sick. Kenneth ignored the gossip. His focus entirely on his daughter. When they reached Kemi's room, Fumi looked up in shock. Kenneth, who is this? This is Baba Duni, Kenneth said quietly. He is here to help Kemi. Fumi's eyes widened with recognition. The traditional healer? But you said... I was wrong, Kenneth interrupted, the words feeling strange in his mouth. I was wrong about many things. Baba Duni approached Kemi's bedside with reverent care. The little girl lay unconscious, her breathing shallow, her fever-flushed face peaceful in sleep. The old healer didn't touch her immediately. Instead, he stood quietly, his eyes closed, as if listening to something only he could hear. She is far from us, he said finally. Her spirit has retreated deep inside to protect itself from the negative energy surrounding this situation. The ancestors are shielding her, but they cannot hold her much longer. Kenneth wanted to ask what that meant in medical terms, but something in the healer's manner silenced him. This was not the time for skepticism or translation into scientific language. Baba Duni placed his weather hand gently on Kemi's forehead. The little girl stared slightly, the first response she had shown in hours. She recognizes the healing touch. Baba Duni murmured, "There is hope, but we must move quickly." "What do you need?" Kenneth asked. "I need to take her to my compound. The herbs I require cannot be brought here. They must be prepared in specific environments with proper spiritual protocols. She will need to stay with me for 3 days." Kenneth's medical instincts screamed in protest. Take a critically ill child out of the hospital, away from monitors, IV fluids, emergency equipment. It went against everything he had been trained to believe. But as he looked at all the medical equipment surrounding his daughter, machines that had failed to heal her, monitors that showed her condition worsening despite aggressive treatment, he realized his modern medical arsenal was powerless. "Okay," he said simply, "what do I need to do?" The preparation for Kemi's departure created chaos in the hospital. Kenneth had to sign multiple releases, acknowledging that he was removing his daughter against medical advice. Several colleagues tried to intervene. "Kenneth, have you lost your mind?" Dr. Folake cornered him in the hallway. "You are taking a critically ill child to some village healer? This could kill her." "She's already dying, Folake," Kenneth replied quietly. "Modern medicine has failed her. I have to try something. But this isn't medicine. This is desperation." Kenneth paused, looking at his colleague with new understanding. Maybe desperation is what I needed to open my mind to possibilities I had closed off. Word of Kenneth's decision spread through the hospital like wildfire. The chief medical officer, who had publicly mocked traditional healers, was now entrusting his own daughter's life to one. Some staff members were shocked, others worried, but a few older nurses nodded with quiet approval. "Sometimes the ancestors know what our education has forgotten," whispered Nurse Aduni, the same woman who had first suggested consulting a traditional healer weeks ago. That evening, Kenneth carefully carried his daughter to Baba Duni's compound on the outskirts of Abeokuta. The healer's home was not what Kenneth had expected. Instead of a ramshackle hut, he found a modest but well-maintained compound with several buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Medicinal plants grew everywhere, not wild and chaotic, but carefully cultivated in organized gardens. "This is my clinic," Baba Duni explained, leading them to a clean, airy room furnished with simple bed and basic amenities. "I have treated hundreds of patients here over the years." Kenneth noticed that the room, while simple, was spotlessly clean. Fresh herbs hung from the ceiling, filling the air with aromatic scents. Everything felt peaceful, almost sacred. As night fell, Baba Duni began his work. He disappeared into the forest alone, returning hours later with handfuls of plants Kenneth didn't recognize. The old healer walked through the night, grinding, mixing, boiling, and preparing various remedies while chanting softly in Yoruba. Kenneth watched, fascinated despite himself. This wasn't the chaotic witchcraft he had imagined. It was methodical, precise, ritualistic, almost scientific in its own way. Each plant serves a specific purpose. Baba Duni explained as he walked. This one purifies the blood. This one calms the spirit. This one opens pathways for healing energy to flow. But the plants alone are not enough. They must be prepared with proper intention, blessed with ancient prayers, and administered with genuine love. Kenneth found himself asking questions. His scientific mind unable to resist trying to understand the process. How do you know which plants to use? How do you determine dosages? Knowledge passed down through generations, Baba Duni replied, crushing fresh leaves with practiced hands. My grandfather taught me, as his grandfather taught him. We learn not just which plants to use, but how to read the patient's spiritual condition, how to understand what their body truly needs beyond what symptoms show. Kenneth watched as the healer prepared a complex mixture, adding ingredients in specific sequences while murmuring prayers. But how do you know it works? How do you measure success? Baba Duni paused in his work, looking at Kenneth with patient eyes. Doctor, how do you measure love? How do you quantify hope? Some things cannot be put in your test tubes, but they are real and powerful. I measure success by watching families reunited, children returned to health, spirits restored to harmony. As dawn approached, Baba Duni completed his preparations. He had created several remedies: a tea to reduce fever, a paste for the mysterious rashes, drops to strengthen chemi spirits, and a special bath mixture to cleanse negative energy. Now we begin, he announced, approaching the bed where little Kemi lay. The first treatment was gentle. Baba Duni carefully administered small sips of herbal tea while chanting softly in Yoruba. Kenneth tensed, his medical training screaming warnings about giving unknown substances to a critically ill child. But as the minutes passed, something remarkable happened. Kemi's breathing, which had been shallow and labored for days, began to deepen. Her fever, which had resisted every modern medication, started to drop. Most remarkably, she opened her eyes for the first time in 24 hours. Daddy, she whispered weakly. Kenneth rushed to her side, tears streaming down his face. I'm here, princess. Daddy is here. Kemi looked around the unfamiliar room, her gaze settling on Baba Duni. Instead of fear, her expression showed curious wonder. Are you the medicine man from my dreams? Baba Duni smiled gently. Hello, little one. Yes, I have been calling to your spirit, asking it to return to us. Over the next 3 days, Kenneth witnessed what he could only describe as miraculous healing. Baba Duni treated Kemi with a combination of herbal remedies, spiritual counseling, dietary adjustments, and energy healing techniques that Kenneth's medical training had never acknowledged. But more than the treatments themselves, Kenneth was struck by Baba Duni's holistic approach. The healer didn't just treat symptoms, he addressed the whole family's spiritual and emotional state. Doctor, Baba Duni explained on the second day, your daughter's illness was triggered by the spiritual imbalance created by your rejection of traditional wisdom. The ancestors were not punishing anyone, but they were calling attention to the broken connection between old knowledge and new knowledge. Kenneth found this explanation difficult to accept intellectually, but he couldn't argue with the results. Kemi was clearly improving, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. She was more alert, more responsive, more like her old self than she had been in weeks. On the third day, as Kemi played quietly in the courtyard, looking almost completely recovered, Baba Duni sat down with Kenneth for a serious conversation. "Doctor, your daughter will be fully healed," he said, "but this experience has taught you something important. What will you do with this knowledge?" Kenneth had been wrestling with this question for 3 days. His entire worldview had been shattered and rebuilt. He had seen things that his medical training said were impossible, yet he could not deny the evidence of his own eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything I believed about medicine, about healing, about what is real and what is not, it has all been turned upside down." Baba Duni nodded understanding. "This is natural, my son. You are not abandoning your medical knowledge. You are expanding it. The best healers, traditional or modern, understand that true healing requires both scientific knowledge and spiritual wisdom. But how do I reconcile them? How do I practice medicine that honors both approaches? By remembering that healing is about serving patients, not protecting your ego. By staying humble enough to learn from sources your education didn't teach you about. By working with traditional healers as partners, not dismissing them as enemies." That evening, as they prepared to return home, Kenneth made a decision that would change his life forever. "Baba Duni," he said, "I want to learn from you. I want to understand how traditional healing works, how it can complement modern medicine. Would you teach me?" The old healer's eyes twinkled with approval. "Doctor, I have been waiting 40 years for a Western-trained physician to ask me that question. Yes, I will teach you. But first, you must do something for me. Anything. You must publicly acknowledge what you have learned. You must tell your colleagues, your community, your radio listeners that traditional medicine has value. You must heal the damage your pride caused to the relationship between our two worlds of healing." Kenneth took a deep breath. This would cost him professionally. Some colleagues would question his judgment. Some might even question his sanity. But as he looked at his healthy, laughing daughter, he knew what he had to do. The following week, Kenneth appeared on the same radio show where he had previously condemned traditional medicine. "Dr. Adebayo," the interviewer began, "we understand you have something important to share with our listeners." Kenneth's voice was steady but humble. "Yes, Tunde, I want to publicly acknowledge that I was wrong about traditional medicine. I spoke from ignorance and arrogance, and I want to apologize to traditional healers and to our listeners." The interview sent shockwaves through Nigeria's medical community. Kenneth told the complete story: his confrontation with Baba Duni, his daughter's mysterious illness, the failure of modern medicine to help her, and her remarkable recovery under traditional treatment. "What I learned," Kenneth maintained, "is that healing is bigger than any one approach. Traditional healers possess knowledge and wisdom that can complement modern medicine, not replace it. We should be working together, not fighting each other." The response was mixed. Some colleagues criticized Kenneth harshly. questioning his judgment and scientific credibility. Medical journals published editorials debating his claims. Professional associations held emergency meetings to discuss his statements. But there was also unprecedented support. Patients who had been helped by traditional healers came forward with their stories. Nurses who had witnessed unexpected healing spoke up. Even some doctors admitted they had seen cases where traditional remedies succeeded where modern medicine failed. Most importantly, Kenneth's courage opened doors for dialogue between traditional healers and medical professionals that had been closed for decades. Dr. Kenneth Adebayo stood in the conference room of Federal Medical Center, Abeokuta, facing an audience of doctors, traditional healers, medical students, and healthcare administrators. On the wall behind him hung a banner reading, First Annual Conference of Integrative Medicine in Nigeria. 1 year ago, Kenneth began. I stood in this hospital and publicly humiliated a traditional healer. Today, I stand before you as someone who has learned that true healing requires both courage to embrace new knowledge and humility to acknowledge old wisdom. In the front row sat Baba Duni, now officially recognized as a consulting traditional healer at the hospital. Beside him sat Tola Oyebamiji, the young woman whose family had first requested traditional healing consultation. She was now completely healthy and serving as a case study in successful integrative treatment. Kenneth's presentation detailed the integrative medicine program he had developed over the past year, working closely with Baba Duni and other respected traditional healers. They had created protocols for combining traditional and modern approaches to healing. We have documented over 200 cases where integrative treatment produced better outcomes than either approach alone, Kenneth reported. Patients with chronic pain, depression, autoimmune disorders, and spiritual distress have all benefited from this collaborative approach. The program wasn't without challenges. Medical regulatory bodies required extensive documentation and safety protocols. Some traditional healers were reluctant to work within hospital systems. Funding was limited and skepticism remained high in many quarters. But the results spoke for themselves. Patient satisfaction increased. Treatment costs decreased in many cases, and most importantly, people were getting better. After the conference, Kenneth walked through the hospital with Baba Duni, their relationship now one of mutual respect and genuine friendship. Doctor, the old healer said, do you remember what I told you the day we first met? That the spirits have a way of teaching humility to those who need it most. Kenneth smiled, thinking of his daughter Kemi, now 7 years old and completely healthy, playing in the hospital garden where she often came to visit her father at work. I remember, Kenneth replied, and I'm grateful for the lesson, even though it was painful. The best lessons usually are, Baba Duni observed. But look what has grown from that pain. Healing for your daughter, wisdom for yourself, and hope for thousands of patients who will benefit from our collaboration. As they watched Kemi playing with other children in the garden, Kenneth reflected on how much his life had changed. He was still a respected doctor, still committed to scientific medicine, but now his practice was enriched by traditional wisdom. He had learned to see patients not just as collections of symptoms to be treated, but as whole human beings, body, mind, and spirit to be healed. Baba Duni, Kenneth said, what do you think the future holds for integrative medicine in Nigeria? The old healer smiled, his weathered face christened with hope. Doctor, I see a future where our children grow up understanding that healing comes in many forms, where young doctors are trained to work with traditional healers, where families don't have to choose between old wisdom and new knowledge, but can benefit from both. And I see, he continued, looking at little Kemi, a generation that won't have to suffer because of the pride and prejudice of their elders. That, my friend, is the greatest healing of all. As the sun set over Abeokuta, casting golden light through the hospital gardens, Kenneth felt a deep sense of peace. His journey from arrogance to humility, from certainty to wisdom, from isolation to collaboration had transformed not just his own life, but the lives of countless patients who will benefit from the integration of traditional and modern healing. The story that began with pride and ended with healing had become more than just one man's journey. It had become a bridge between two worlds of medicine, a model for how different approaches to healing could work together for the greater good. And in the laughter of his healthy daughter, in the grateful smiles of healed patients, in the respectful collaboration between traditional healers and modern doctors, Kenneth could see the future of medicine in Africa, not divided by prejudice and pride, but untied by the common goal of healing humanity. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that wisdom can come from unexpected sources and that pride often blinds us to the truths we need to learn. In our modern world, we sometimes dismiss traditional knowledge without understanding its value, but true wisdom lies in remaining open to learning, in admitting when we're wrong, and in recognizing that healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, often requires approaches that go beyond what we initially understand. The integration of traditional and modern medicine is happening across Africa and around the world, not because traditional methods are replacing modern ones, but because the most effective healing often comes from combining the best of both worlds. Whether you are a healthcare professional, a patient, or someone seeking wisdom in any area of life, remember Dr. Kenneth's journey. Sometimes our greatest growth comes from being humble enough to learn from those we once dismissed, and brave enough to admit when we were wrong. Thank you for watching Raw Tales Africa. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from its message. Remember, the best stories are the ones that change how we see the world and perhaps how we see ourselves. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious, and always remember that healing comes in many forms.